When it comes to culture, what do you say culture actually is?
Culture in the workplace are the behaviors, the verbals and nonverbals that really set the tone for what is acceptable and isn't acceptable. Every day, every person in an organization is actively contributing to that culture, or they're actively working to dismantle that culture.
There's a lot of incredible humans out there that are reminding leaders, this is how you should take care of your people. But I feel like we're going backwards.
We've had return to office. No, you can stay home. No, some are returned. We have tariffs. We have layoffs. It's caused a lot of ambiguity and unease, especially at that manager level. A lot of our managers in the workplace today were promoted not because they were great at people managing, but they were great individual contributors. And their manager was like, how about you manage some people? And so that's when I really started looking at how can you apply psychoanalytic perspective into workplace culture? Because the things that we carry in us, the things that maybe we're not addressing, or maybe we are working through in therapy, they still show up in the workplace. And some of those things are unconscious. The way we respond to conflict. Do we shut down? Do we leave the room? Do we get quiet? Do we get angry and throw things? I've seen all of those things. I've seen individuals at companies say, let's step outside and handle this.
Oh my God, we are so fucked. Katie, thank you so much for being here again.
Yeah.
I think this is like your third interview.
It's like, yeah,
so
third one.
You are like the most appeared person, but this would be the first time doing video. So
yes.
Again, welcome back.
Thank you.
I had an actual event in this space, and you said something, during that event that I want to read out.
Okay.
And I want us to go through that.
Where managers are facing a crisis. And that crisis looks something like this. 75% of them are experiencing burnout. 41% of their time is actually spent on managing people, only 41% of the time. 27% of our managers today are actively working on their exit strategy, and fewer employees want to be promoted to managers. Self-confidence has been identified as both their number one challenge and their number one goal in the workplace. And organizations lose $15.4 billion annually on manager turnover.
So I want to talk about that. First, by starting with the 70% of employee engagement. We had a conversation about this. So just as a refresher, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so Simon Sinek, and I'll back up, all of this data is pulled from Simon Sinek. He did research with about 1,000 middle managers across various sectors all over the globe. And so these results are coming from those managers. And It aligns with what you and I have talked about in the past, which has come from other...
Gallup.
Yeah,
yes, Gallup did the 70% as well.
Yeah, Gallup. And the fact that we're seeing this from different research angles, different points, different surveys, means that it isn't just a one-off. We are, in fact, facing a crisis. So that 70% of employee engagement really being determined by the manager means a couple of things. Like, the manager is the gatekeeper to a lot of things for an individual contributor.
Right.
I need to go through my manager most of the time if I want to get professional development, or if I want to go to a conference, or if I'm going to be invited into a room with people who are my manager's equals, but not mine. So oftentimes a manager acts like a gatekeeper to certain ability to move up, to develop, even to have stretch assignments in the organization. The manager is also kind of that turning piece for individual contributors from the perspective of, if the manager isn't having a one-on-one conversation about, hey, what did you do this week that was challenging? How are we stretching you? What can I do differently to support you and empower you? Then that person is likely going to go stagnant in their role, or they're going to become disengaged. And so the manager really plays this key piece on a number of levels when we think about engagement.
Right. Wow. So like, I just say all that. It's like, but 75% of them are experiencing burnout at the same time.
Yeah.
So how does those 2 points or these two like 70% and 75% connect.
Yeah. Managers and middle managers especially are in this unenviable position where they have to be kind of a listening device and a microphone at the same time. They're kind of taking in information, usually from the executive level, trying to translate that and communicate that down to their direct reports, and then taking in information and feedback from their direct reports and communicating that back up. And there's no support for the managers in any of this. They're kind of in that the waves of the push and pull, the ebb and flow. So especially during times of crisis and times of change in organizations, the manager is really the buffer for both the executive team. Hey, you need to communicate this to your direct reports, and they buffer the executive team from some of that blowback or some of that frustration. And they're the buffer for the direct reports who maybe are feeling anxious. They have to play the role of, I'm here to calm you. I'm here to help with the ambiguity. I'm here to help with some of the change management, even if they themselves aren't receiving any of that. And so the 75% with the burnout, if we look at especially the past year, we've had so much ambiguity in the workplace culture. We've had return to office. No, you can stay home. No, some are return. We have tariffs. We have layoffs. It's caused a lot of ambiguity and unease, especially at that manager level. And they bear the brunt of the emotional burden and the psychological toll of that.
No, I hear you speak, and I'm saying there's so much responsibility, but then the stat is saying that only 41% of their time is actually spent on managing people. What are they doing with
they're
the
in
rest?
Meetings. They're in meetings to have more meetings, to talk about the meeting, or the committee to talk about the committee with the meeting. Their time isn't managed well because the expectation is you're having all these one-on-ones, you're supporting, ideally you're supporting your direct reports, and also you're doing this strategic work and you're moving our goals forward as an organization. And that's a very hard place to straddle, especially for a middle manager who maybe isn't equipped with the tools, because a lot of our managers in the workplace today were promoted not because they were great at people managing, but they were great individual contributors. And their manager was like, you've done a great job. I like you. Yeah. You did that technical thing really well. How about you manage some people? And there's no intentionality around what that means to manage people or what tools they need in their own toolkit to do that.
So what's the gap here? Why isn't that, when someone gets that promotion, they're not also getting the promotion to learn how to do the job that they're being promoted to?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of theories about this. I go to workplace culture as the first question. If the culture of the workplace, and when we look at performance and advancement and succession conversations in the workplace, if those are done with intentionality, meaning, hey, where are we going by 2030 as an organization? And what knowledge, skills, and attributes do we need in our leaders to take us there? That is intentionality. That's saying we may not actually need what we've had for the past 20 or 30 years in our leadership seats. We may need something a little bit different. And something that I'm hearing a lot is comfort with ambiguity, because the environment is changing so quickly. I mean, even technology is changing how we do work. Someone who can sit with ambiguity and kind of sit in the gray is a really, really great attribute to have. But we don't screen for those things when we hire people, when they're doing a technical job. And so oftentimes where the miss is that we just simply do the same thing that has been done before, which is, okay, well, this person has been here X number of years, time for them to kind of step up into the role.
And just to piggyback over that, another thing you mentioned is self-confidence has been identified as both their number one challenge and the number one goal in the workplace. That sounds like a beautiful contradiction.
It is.
And I'm now wondering who is creating this problem.
Yeah.
It sounds like the leaders. I'm trying not to be too hard on leaders, because every interview that I did, I hear my guests always be like, well, we have to be a little bit nice. We have to have a little bit grace on leadership,
right?
Because they're also
they're leaders,
dealing with the same thing,
and they feel it. Yeah, they feel that that those stressors. What I would say, and kind of the methodology that I take when I work with organizations, it's a little bit of a unique perspective, and it's kind of the psychodynamics of organizational structure and organizational change. And by looking at psychodynamics, everyone has heard of organizational psychology,
right.
How behaviors in the workplace impact the culture of the workplace or impact the bottom line. But when you look at it from a psychodynamic perspective, it shifts just a little. You're starting to look at, okay, the things that we see coming out are just symptoms of something that are sometimes subconscious in the culture of the organization, not just in the individual manager or executive.
Right.
So really beginning to look at kind of the onion layers of, we have the individuals, and then they've got their structure of team dynamic. They've got the structure of the executive dynamic, and then they've got the culture of the organization. If any of those feel out of balance or off kilter, so if there's pushback on, hey, we should do things differently, if that's not being supported in all of those layers, then it's likely going to go underground or disappear. And so a lot of the symptoms of self-confidence, well, what is self-confidence? Like, what is that rooted in? It's rooted in not feeling empowered, very likely. It's rooted in maybe managers micromanaging, so needing to have a sense of control over their individual contributors.
Right.
And yet it's something that so many people are striving for. So they want to have a sense of self. They want to know, I can make decisions, I can operate autonomously, and I can be a contributor to the team.
Right.
But without the unconscious coming to the conscious and being addressed, those patterns will just continue to replicate themselves.
Right. No, yeah, and even to your final point of the cost being like 15 billion annually on just turnover, which means they're just leaving.
Yeah.
But I think that's because the generations are also changing, and we've had this discussion. There's like 5 different generations in the workplace, and the younger you go, the more they're like, I'm not going to do this. And I want to know from your own, just like overview that you've done, and some of the work that you've done. Where do you see the gap between those different generations, and why do you think some of them stay and some of them don't stay?
It's, to me, a very simple answer that has a very complicated underpinning, which is it's the culture. Does the culture value my individual contribution? Does the culture see me? And yes, even boomers want to be seen and heard and valued, which I think we often overlook that. We say, okay, it's the younger generations that want to feel that value, that want to feel like they have a unique contribution.
Right.
But I hear it oftentimes from older generations. They feel like they're becoming invisible in the workplace, that they themselves are lacking confidence as these new folks come in who have a different set of technical skills, but also emotional skills. They can navigate conversations and relationships in a very different way. In previous generations, it was very much the kind of military do as I say. This is how it goes.
Right. You
don't ask questions. And now organizational structures are becoming a little bit more flattened, where the younger generations want to know. I want to know why. I want to know why this decision was made. I value transparency. And so I think we see people leaving or coming in conflict with what that means for a dynamic in the workplace between people.
Ah, that makes sense. And I am like, I used to hire so many different generations at the same time at every given time.
Yeah.
That's why I let's just say that company did not work out. I did my best. I tried to make everything work out, but it's like, I felt like I had a culture, but the more I got familiar with the culture, I realized, wow, that was really bad.
Yeah.
I was traumatizing people out there.
Well, and do you think self-confidence was
Yes,
a
big
piece
time,
of that
big time.
as well?
Yeah, back then I had a stutter. and I was working really hard to make sure that people actually take me seriously and know that I know what I'm doing. And I felt like the stutter was like, like jeopardizing that. So I felt like I had to be a certain way. So I think that kind of rubbed off a lot of people wrong, because they're like, wait, like, just be yourself, bro. And I remember someone gifting me a shirt saying, just be yourself. I don't know whether that was intentional, but I was like, hey, you know what? I'll do my best. I do want to ask you this though, because as we were talking about all this, and it's more of a personal question, but from my experience in the workplace, we probably already have talked about this because we've had so many conversations like just over the years. When it comes to culture, what do you say culture actually is? Because I talk to a lot of people, everyone has a different definition. I don't know whether that's like a universal, like this is what a culture is.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's one universal definition, and a lot of it comes from, the methodology or the theories that you ascribe to in the workplace, like what is operating, what isn't operating. So for me, the culture in the workplace are the behaviors, the verbals and nonverbals that really set the tone for what is acceptable and isn't acceptable. Every day, every person in an organization is actively contributing to that culture, or they're actively working to dismantle that culture. And that's where the people who are actively working to dismantle it are the ones often bringing up the things that are unconscious to the conscious. So people who are new to organizations, like in their first 90 days, they are so valuable. And I think organizations spend a lot of time onboarding into here's our culture, but they spend less time talking about what are things that are curious to you, like what questions do you have? And asking something like, why do you do this thing that way? Why do you have meetings this way? There's a company that I'm familiar with, and they start every meeting with a safety conversation because safety is one of their top values. And it's everything from like, hey, it's cold and flu season, to, hey, be careful of slip and falls, or something like that. But it's a value that they're ingraining, and it's bringing the unconscious to the conscious because they're talking about it. But we often don't stop and ask new people, what are you noticing? What is at odds with what you've experienced before? Because we become so ingrained in the culture. It's like the air we breathe when we're a part of that organization. And sometimes we don't notice when pollutants get into the air, but new people can be like, wow, that's choking my lungs a little bit. Like, what are we doing here?
Well, yeah, that just took me to the movie Avatar.
Yes.
That I'm gonna butcher this, but the Aowa tribe. How they're all connected, and they all have to plug into the tree.
Yes. Very similar. Yeah.
They're very similar to the company culture as well. One person just polluting that experience impact all of them.
It absolutely does. Yeah.
So like back to the cost, the 15 billion. Why is it that this is such a big cost? And today we're still talking about culture, but I feel like the cost keep getting bigger.
Yeah. And a lot of people point to direct costs, like, oh, this person leaves and now we have to replace them. So we're down, whatever that is. And I hear typically quoted for director and above levels in organizations that it's 1.5 to 2 times the annual cost or their annual salary to replace them. Then you look at, okay, if they were in a position where they were moving forward sales, all those sales potentially are lost. If they had strong relationships with customers, those customer relationships are potentially damaged. What is the impact across the organization? So if they were a manager, what happened to the morale of that team? Maybe that team has now become disengaged. All of those numbers create that big number of the 15 billion.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah,
because you don't think of all it's like every employee, it's like its own like like little world.
That's right.
That they've created, the relationships, the accounts that they bring in, the interpersonal relationship they've developed, the trust that they've established within the workplace, and the moment they're gone, that like it's gone, like the universe is gone.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Knowing that it's such a big cause, and I don't know what we're gonna do about it, because I hear, for example, the Simon Sinek's of the world, and and today at this moment there's such a global failure in like leadership in general. So I'm like, what's happening? Why is it that the more we're getting more solutions out there, I feel like we're going behind? I know I mentioned Simon Sinek as I said this. I'm realizing that. Not saying that's his fault. It's not your fault, bro.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that there's a lot of incredible humans out there that are reminding leaders, like, this is how you should take care of your people. But I feel like we're going backwards. Like, the whole saying of like, 2 steps and then you take 1 step back. So I don't know if you have an answer to that exactly as to what's happening.
I mean, I think it's a combination effect. We're having people who are underprepared to become managers. They're undertrained,
Right.
and at every level, we can go back to kind of the middle manager crisis. People not wanting to be managers because emotionally and psychologically, they're not prepared by the company to step into things like, hey, you need to fire this person. What support are they getting afterwards for the morale hit and the psychological toll that takes on them having to fire someone from their team?
Yeah.
They're still expected to show up strong and tough and kind of have this shell on of like, I can do this, I got this. And no one's there to support, hey, that had to be really tough for you.
Right.
Can we talk about how that feels? They're also really underprepared when it comes to questions around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so when you have different perspectives coming into the workplace, like our workplaces 30 years ago looked nothing like how they look today.
Right.
And so when you have different lived experiences and different perspectives, who's there to help navigate those conversations and the inevitable, hey, I see it this way, well, I see it this way. So what happens? And oftentimes learning and development, organizational development, those things are the first to be cut and removed from organizations. HR, first thing to be cut and removed from organizations. And those are the things that offer those levels of support. But I would say, Simon Sinek is a great example of someone that lives external to companies. How do you begin to internalize messages from someone like Simon Sinek or Brene Brown into your company? How do you begin to live in those ways? And that's when that becomes part of the culture.
Right.
So Brene Brown talks about rumbling and how it's critical for teams to rumble together. Right. And this was something that came out of research at Ohio State. Bruce Tuckman was the first researcher to talk about storming, norming, performing, and how teams have to go through this process. But if we're not allowing teams to do that in our companies and we just put a group of people in a room and say, figure it out, we're failing them, we're failing our innovation, we're failing our bottom line.
Right. Yeah, they just took me back to college.
Yeah.
Every group project. I fortunately I was a very nerdy kid in college.
Were you the one everyone relied on to do? Yep.
Yeah. I was that kid. So my back broke while I was in college doing people's homework. And speaking of college, why are you so, like focused on this work and very passionate about it?
Yeah.
Why is Katie interested in this?
Yeah.
And why is it that you want to talk about it?
Yeah. I kind of backed into organizational psychology work. My background is my PhD is in international education. And for a long time when I was doing research, I was looking at how we remove barriers to people's success.
Right.
So for me at that time, it was working with Turkish immigrant women. And then it became my students in my classroom who were first generation college students, didn't know how to navigate the systems that are unspoken systems, that there are gatekeepers to. And then I kind of made my way into nonprofit and then the corporate world. And in looking at my own therapy and how I've kind of had this really amazing therapeutic journey along the way, I definitely subscribe to the idea of everyone needs to have a therapist.
Right.
And I believe that companies need to have a therapist, an organizational therapist as well. And so that's when I really started looking at how can you apply psychoanalytic perspective into workplace culture? Because the things that we carry in us, the things that maybe we're not addressing or maybe we are working through in therapy, they still show up in the workplace. And some of those things are unconscious. The way we respond to conflict. Do we shut down? Do we leave the room? Do we get quiet? Do we get angry and throw things? I've seen all of those things. I've seen individuals at companies say, let's step outside and handle this.
Oh my God, we're so fucked.
And so like, there's some unconscious things operating there at that level.
I just have to, I hear you speak, and I've seen some really wild scenarios. I was like, we're effed.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to get to the solution to deal with conflict properly, but sorry, go ahead.
No, and so conflict is a great space to say, okay, how can the company culture help support and hold what needs to be held for individuals who maybe need to do a little bit more work for themselves.
Yeah.
A company culture that enables someone to say, let's step outside and settle this like men is probably dealing with some other issues in other areas of the company as well.
Right. So like, how do companies get to that point to where people feel comfortable to say, let's step outside?
Yeah.
I kind of want to watch that. Maybe I'll go watch The Office tonight.
So it felt, it wasn't real, like it felt like an Office episode. They were so, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would say, slowly and then all at once is how it often feels with companies. And oftentimes companies don't recognize it until they don't recognize that they need change until it is too painful for them to not change.
Right.
And so that could look like they have a lot of loss in their profit. All of a sudden, year over year gains are completely gone.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, wow, we may need to lay people off. Or their retention has dropped significantly. And the pain point is, why do we have to keep hiring for this position or for this team? Like, what is happening here?
Right.
It's slowing us down. And so oftentimes I think it takes the pain point for companies to recognize they need change. And it's often too late. Like, there has been a path of toxicity or destruction or things that have happened. But really it starts with people going on, I think it's kind of autopilot.
Yeah.
Like the culture, when they let the culture operate by itself, it will run them.
Right.
And culture will sometimes fall to its lowest common denominator when that happens.
Right.
And if we're not giving the culture the same attention that we are to our P&L, it's going to suffer just like our P&L does.
Right. Yeah. It's like, so sometimes it takes a Bane for people to actually appreciate, Batman.
That's right.
Like Bane has to come and disrupt everything. They're like,
That's
we need Batman.
And that's a great example of Bane is kind of the mirror.
Yeah.
Like, he holds the mirror up because Batman is there kind of trying to keep the culture
just
operating.
HR.
Yeah. He is HR.
He's literally HR.
Batman is HR.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good analogy. I'm so proud of that.
That was great.
Yeah.
Especially the Christian Bale Batman.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. That's my favorite. Don't get me started right now before this turned into a Batman.
That's right.
Workplace.
That's right. We don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Yeah.
But so I did read your dissertation, and it is phenomenal. My immigration lawyer told me to slow down. Because I was like, we did a video about that. I was like, I'll take a little break from advocacy work now. But back to the workplace, back to the 9 to 5. So again, back to the cost, and I'm always going to go back to it because it's such a big cost. And I know something that you also touched on was, usually when a problem happens, they want to just fire people. And it's so interesting that the problem is that you are not training the people well.
That's right.
And then the moment something happened, they cut the people off. And lately there's been so many firings, like job cuts across the board. Like Amazon, I think they laid off around 14, I think.
Yeah, 14,000.
14,000. How is that normal? Like, I remember, back in the old days, firing someone was a big deal.
Yeah.
like people would get sad about it. They'll cry about it. But now it's like you hear like Amazon laid off 14,000 people. You're like, how is that happening? I feel like there's also a disconnect with the exit as well.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you have a take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have heard, as firings pick up at companies, they're doing like group firings where there will be a dozen or more people on a Zoom call. Everyone gets called in. One HR person or one manager is like, this call is to dismiss you from the organization. And then they end the call. And that's it. So
like Succession. So that's actually happening right
now.
That's
exactly, yeah. And I've also heard, and I knew someone who worked in the banking industry, and he had an underperforming member on the team, hadn't ever done a PIP for this person, hadn't ever had like a formal performance conversation. And the company decided it was time to let her go.
Right.
And they handed him a script and they said, you read this and then you hang up the call. And HR was not there. He was not allowed to ask HR to be there. And so it is becoming so transactional.
Right.
And I always wonder what happens to the manager after that. Like the collective that's getting dismissed, that trauma is hard enough to be seen as just a number after you've put so much time into the work that you're doing at a company. But the manager who stays is their guilt, is their anxiety of I could be next.
Yep.
And what happens to their performance level as a result of that? And no one is addressing those things within the companies. It's just business as usual, keep operating.
No, yeah, it's gotten so bad lately. And it's so heartbreaking whenever I'm just on social media. And now that my work has been shifting in the workplace, I keep seeing like, because the algorithm delivers, and I keep seeing all these people recording them being fired.
Really?
And it's like so bizarre watching that. You see them break down. It's like they know it's going to happen, but then whenever it happens, I'm just like, what happened to the humanity in the workplace? I feel like the more, again, back to my point, the more we're saying all of this, like people, culture, all these things, I feel like we're just taking 10 steps back.
Yeah.
Like things are getting even more ridiculous out there. And I don't know whether that's because there's such a, so many different generations in the workplace. I don't know whether that also made it so that people have gotten so comfortable, because there's been a time where, employees can just hop from one job to another. Yeah. So I don't know whether this is kind of like a retaliation in their head, because I'm trying to justify, or maybe not even justify, but basically understand why is it that this has happened and become such a normal thing. And they know the cost, because I talk to so many CFOs now, and they can see it on the, like the balance sheet. They know that it's a cost, but usually firing sounds better or easier. But then it's costing them this much.
Right. And they're firing the wrong people.
Yes.
Is to me what the most unfortunate thing is they're firing the symptom and not the root cause. And so that symptom is going to show up somewhere else. So if the manager is the issue, and I'm going to use an extreme example of a manager who actually should be terminated from an organization. So rather than a manager going through professional development or being receptive to that, there's just a manager who creates an environment that's toxic for everyone, and they fire the unproductive workers, that pattern of behavior is going to persist in the organization. And what does that tell every other employee at that organization? It tells them that it's okay to operate in a certain way and that you're protected, and the people who get dismissed are the ones who are the victims of that, or who don't keep silent about the things that are happening to them. Indeed. So it actually creates an environment and a culture of lower productivity when that happens. And you didn't invite me on to be an optimist. This isn't Simon Sinek's optimism podcast. So we know I'm not an optimist.
It's like life happens. Okay.
Yeah.
This is more of a Gary Vee spiel.
Very much so.
Yeah.
But I think this is the opportunity, like managers, companies, you have the data you have the data to say it actually doesn't take all that much. It's not going to take you $15 billion to fix the problem. It's going to take you really small steps. The Gallup research was just like, hey, y'all, we just want some mentors and we want some professional development.
Right.
That's all we need. That's all we want, and we'll be happy. And that's, a few $100s per person.
Yeah, per person, yeah. I mean, they have the budget, because I talked to it enough to know that they do, and usually goes to the wrong things. Not all the time, obviously, but unfortunately, in my experience, usually a lot of the time.
Yes, yeah.
So I know we've had so many conversations, and you mentioned PIP. I know what it means, but I forgot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I don't know if you don't mind clarifying what's a PIP.
Performance Improvement Plan.
Yes. Yeah, I know that.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you for that clarification. So going back to the manager itself, how would you, if you had the opportunity to solve this problem, what would that look like?
Yeah, it would look like working within the executive leadership team to reset a culture that is one of ownership, one of empowerment, and one of intentionality. And all of those things require that to happen at each executive team member at their level.
Right.
And so extreme ownership in the idea of every person having a stake in the value and the culture of the company, that's something that has to come from the top down. Has to be instilled, has to be reinforced. And I don't think enough leaders take the time to map that out and map that to, hey, this is how it impacts our P&L, because it does absolutely impact whatever you're selling, whatever you're doing at your company. If an individual contributor knows that they're valued, they have ownership of their work in a way that they feel empowered to make certain decisions, or they're confident in the type of work that they're contributing back to the organizational why, they're more likely to take risk, they're more likely to be innovative, and they're more likely to drive things forward rather than kind of sit back and let the work drive them.
Wow. And then I just say that especially in my own experience, I notice when you say work drive them, I think that also on another side is like the identity piece. A lot of people put their identity in their work.
Yes.
So I feel like that's also a contributing factor to why sometimes managers are not open to maybe there's trust is like missing at the same time with the managers and their leaders. But most of the time, the identity is in that work. Yeah. So saying that you don't know what you're doing, that automatically disqualifies you.
That's right.
And then the burnout happened. The 75%, they spend so much time meeting because that's what you're supposed to do as a manager.
That's
you meet
right.
about a meeting. You meet about a meeting. It keeps going on and on and on. And then now the 27% are just thinking about, well, I probably shouldn't do this. The next person watching them and be like, this doesn't sound fun.
Yeah.
And then I do appreciate the way that you go about it because, especially when it comes to the solution itself. I also think we should start the top from, going down because if the leaders don't care, they're more likely to cut whenever something happened. They're going to be like, well, what is this thing? It doesn't benefit. Let's cut it, even though hundreds of employees are appreciating it.
That's right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say on that topic, starting from the top is critical as well, because that's where the organizational why is set. Like, why these goals? Why this vision? Why this strategy?
Right.
And it's critical that executive leadership can name that so that those middle managers can translate that to their teams, so that individual contributors understand, I'm not just sweeping floors, I'm helping to put a rocket in space, which is like NASA has used.
They don't just walk and slip.
That's right.
And break their leg. Now no one's flying.
So everyone knows, okay, I might be just sweeping floors, but I'm ensuring the safety. I'm doing whatever. And that is contributing to the bigger why of why we're all here. And that's when people stay.
Yeah. Well, we're getting to the end of this, and I know you were actually like one of the OGs that added to the 4 C's,
Yes.
which was crisis
Yes.
in the previous season. And
That's that optimist in
I
me.
know, right?
I went right
You were
to
like-
crisis.
You like crisis. But so now with the new season, I like to share the 4 C's and see what people think about it. And if they have anything that they can add to it, or maybe rearrange it properly. So I wanted to get your take. I know you added crisis into that.
Yeah.
It used to be the 3 C's.
I know.
And then it became the 4 C's.
Yeah.
Earlier, my previous guest added another C, connection, as like a C around the 4 C's. So I wanted to see whether you had any other C's to add, or maybe clear up a few things.
Okay,
around
so
the 4 C's.
tell me again your equation.
So the first C is clarity, communications. Second C, capacity, and crisis, which you coined for the 4 C's.
Yeah.
But the goal is to deal with conflict. So conflict is the invisible C that the other 4 C's are designed to address.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think?
I love the connection piece.
I know, right? I was like, whoa. Okay.
Yeah, I think that really underscores everything else. If we're in conflict, can we draw on connection?
Yeah.
Can we draw on these other resources and tools? I'm going to re-emphasize crisis, though, because I do think crisis, we are experiencing a crisis of clarity, of capacity. And that crisis, the symptoms are showing up as manager burnout,
Right.
as people not being retained, as people not wanting to become managers anymore. And I don't have another C to add. I wish I had my thesaurus with me.
No, you added solid C. Crisis.
Yeah, crisis is the...
There's a lot of C's that were added,
Yeah.
but those were the 4 C's that made
Yeah.
it. And crisis became like, this is it.
Yeah,
And this is, if you don't deal with the first 3 C's,
that's right.
we slowly go into crisis.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the toolkit to deal with conflict. So now crisis is like, hey, what's up? I'm here.
And I think once we're in crisis, we can become easily paralyzed by, oh my gosh, it's so bad. We don't know how we got here. We don't know how to get out of here. And that's where people like me come in to say, okay, there are things that we can do that actually, if we turn this one thing just a little bit this way, and if we have these types of conversations, or if we sit with the stuff for just a little bit longer, the clarity will absolutely come. And that's where I think clarity, in order to get there, my therapist always says, the only way through it is through it.
Absolutely. There's no way around it.
There's no way around it.
It's still gonna be there.
And companies want to find all the ways around it. And sometimes
actually, that's the saying. Let's work around it.
Yeah, let's have a workaround.
Let's circle back, right?
Yeah, and the only way through it is through. And sometimes you have to sit in the shit swamp and understand, like, okay, what is this teaching us? What lessons are we learning?
Right.
And that's when the unconscious becomes conscious. That's how you gain clarity and you work through it.
Right. And I do like that you say that there's a crisis with like clarity to gain capacity. Something that I just connected in my head. You were Madam Crisis. Okay.
I am Madam Crisis.
Because the reason why we're having conflict is because there's a mini crisis in clarity.
That's
People don't know how to be clear.
Yeah.
And there's a crisis in communication. They don't know how to communicate.
Yeah.
And that turns into anxiety, and then you run out of capacity because there's crisis problem. There's a crisis happening in every level.
And you can even say in those areas of crisis where I don't know clearly how to communicate, we turn away from connection.
Right.
And to bring in that last C that was brought up, when we turn away from connection, that's when we lose our humanity.
Oh, wow. Shoosh. You and Mary just like cemented connection.
I don't have a
now.
C word for humanity, but
I may have to figure out how to fit in connection now. And then I told her earlier, by the end of the time, it would be like 50 C's.
I know.
Yeah. And then one more thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which we kind of touched on, was COVID. We like talked about.
Is that another C you want to add to this?
I know. No, that is definitely. I'm definitely avoiding that for sure. Yeah. But yeah, we like touched on DEI and like how COVID played into why DEI became such a bad thing, to where now SHRM, the biggest I guess they're not even HR experts anymore.
No, they try to tell us that they weren't HR experts.
Right.
They try to argue in court that
they're like, we're not HR.
We're not HR.
And
so
we're the one who
don't
issued the
expect us to
certification.
know how not to harass people.
Yeah.
What do we know?
Right. But
Judge would define it.
But so like, how did COVID play to all of these issues? Because I feel like we like touched on it the last time, but then we like ran out of time, and I want to make sure we talk about it before we do again.
Yeah.
But how does COVID inspire all these problems? Like, what was the perfect storm leading up to DEI being such a like a bad thing, and now SHRM saying, "Hey, we don't know what HR is. Do not listen to us."
Yeah. So I think COVID I would say 2020 was really the igniter of all of these things. So we have people prior to 2020 where companies were like, there's no possibility you're going to work from home.
Right.
I was working at a university at the time. I was working in advancement, and I asked to work from home one day a month. And they were like, nope, we're going to need a video of your office. We're going to need to approve your office space. And that was 6 weeks before we went into lockdown. And then all of a sudden, we're working at our kitchen tables, wherever we can do the work, it's getting done.
Right.
But what happened was we lost sight of one another. We lost sight of the humanity to what you were talking about before. The crisis that emerged was, for a long time, people didn't know, were they going to lose family members? Some people lost family members.
Right.
Some people, they themselves were sick. They were immune compromised. And so all of these things that companies didn't know how to address became the forefront, which was mental health and psychological safety. Companies all of a sudden were like, wait, this is a thing. We have to talk about this. And then DEI happened. DEI was happening. DEI has always been around.
Yeah.
I'll be very clear about that.
Right.
But it became a hot topic for organizations when they realized this was a major point that would recruit and retain high quality talent into their organizations.
Right.
And diversity, equity, and inclusion suddenly became, this is how we're going to fix our mental health. But it was mostly performative. Most companies, we saw kind of the DEI industrial complex emerge, which was a lot of people trying to fit the need, but a lot of the work wasn't internalized by the companies. So the companies would go out, we're going to bring in the speaker, we're going to do this training, but the companies themselves, because it wasn't part of the culture, it just became a performance of, okay, look, we did this training now, everyone, we're fine, right? Everything is great. And so slowly people started to feel like their identity wasn't seen or heard or valued at the organization. And managers were not equipped with skill sets to how do you have conversations when you have differing views on your team, or you have people who feel very strongly about the presidential election and they want to talk about it, but they don't feel like they can show up as themselves to work. How do you create that space? And we moved away as a culture, as a collective culture, from DEI, and SHRM suddenly removed DEI basically from its website, and then began to talk about workplace civility, as if we can have conversations about connection and civility without conversations about my identity. Like if you believe my existence is somehow inadequate or less than or inferior to yours, how can we have a conversation about civility? And so we're starting to see, the sidestepping, the workarounds, because no one wants to go through it. It's too threatening.
There's a crisis everywhere.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. I saw your post on LinkedIn about SHRM.
Oh, yes.
And
that went viral.
It was so beautiful.
That one went viral.
Just the way you wrote it.
Thank you.
Just a chef's kiss.
Thank you.
Can't even say the word. but again, we've got to the closing. And again, thank you for that. Because I wanted to make sure that we touched that. I had a few people like, man, I would have loved to hear more on her thoughts of COVID and
thank
DEI.
you for that.
So thank you for just closing that loop. JJ, you got your answer. She was JJ.
Oh, JJ, yes.
But so as we close, you've heard this closing question, but
Yes.
Now in a new year, things have happened. We've watched Bad Bunny perform. It was awesome. And I want to know, based on everything that has happened this year, how is your spirit right now?
Bent but not broken.
Why is that?
There are glimmers of hope and joy when we stop to look around and see them. They're there. I mean, Bad Bunny, I moved to Puerto Rico when I was 6 weeks old. That was really where I was raised.
Right.
And I kind of, in a weird way, call it home. Like I grew up there, and watching Bad Bunny and watching that celebration, I was in tears, I was dancing, I was screaming, I was laughing, I was crying. It was all of the emotions of there's still hope.
Yeah.
There's still a way forward in all of this. And so while the hours and there are days that seem really difficult and like we're not going to get through it, there's a collective saying, nah, we're going to do this. We're going to do this together.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love the message in the end when he held the football.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I think it says "We Are America."
Yeah, and then he named all of the countries in the Americas.
Like Canada was happy.
Canada was like, yeah, we got a
He
shout
said,
out.
finally we got it. I saw online people started calling it like the snow Latina country. It was funny.
That's great.
But again, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
I know this is like your third, third or fourth?
Third or fourth.
Yeah, one of them.
How is your spirit?
Oh, hey, my spirit is, wow, you kind of caught me there. I was like, how is my spirit? I mean, to be honest, I'm very exhausted, but I still have the energy to go out and do things.
That's good.
I about 2 weeks ago, I like cut my hand. That's scarred there now.
Oh my gosh.
And this little guy, like literally, my entire finger here was not. It just felt weird.
Yeah.
And when I go to bed, I do this. So I would wake up and it would be like throbbing. So it took, it definitely stressed me out. And finally, I now have a system whenever I go to bed to make sure I don't lay on it, because it still will like come. But it's a cool looking scar. It looks like a Nike now.
Yeah. You have to have a good story to go with it now.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a silly story. Okay. It was this table that cut me. It's
we can work on a better story for you.
Yeah, I know. It's something that I love doing. So, fortunately, I don't mind the scar. But my spirit is good. I just need to rest a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, make sure I can eat later. So.
Yeah.
But again, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
This was fun.
Yeah.